Hello, my name's Peter Gore. I'm a Professor of Practice in Healthy Ageing at Newcastle University, and I'm going to talk to you about ageing and what we can do about ageing. So what happens when we age? Well, there are three factors or three things that I'd like to look at. We have chronic conditions, comorbidity that people often talk about. We also have frailty, that's a very common medical term. And then we have disability. Most people understand disability. I'm going to modify the definition of disability a little bit and talk about the pattern that occurs specifically around ageing, so age-related decline. These things interact, but they are separate trends. So I'm going to focus on age-related decline and what we can do about it. There are 15 markers that we use. These are the kinds of things, so not being able to climb stairs, not being able to bathe or wash yourself, housework, various things like that. Why are these particular ones important? Because essentially when you can't do these 15, you cannot live independently. So that's the important thing. It's not the only things that people have problems with, but if you can't do these 15, you won't be able to live independently. The really interesting thing about these things that a colleague discovered is that they actually happen in an order. So this is the order that they happen in. The first thing you can't do is reach your toes to cut your toenails. The last thing on this list that you can't do is feed yourself. And so you can see why people are either then getting full-time care from family and or friends, or they're in residential or nursing care if you can't do these. So these are important. We can turn these into a trajectory, and we call this compression of functional decline, or a rather easier title, the LifeCurve. This is the paper that we wrote on this, and there are kind of two aspects of that I want to cover. First is trajectories, what they look like and how you can change them, and the second is a conceptual approach to what you do in terms of interventions to make sure that you have the best journey that you can. So let's look at the LifeCurve. Here's two different trajectories. Here's Emily, here's Jack. It's clear that Jack's had more years at higher levels of capability. And the whole point of compression is actually taking an Emily journey, and it didn't have to be, it's not a male and female thing, I just picked two examples. It's moving from a less good trajectory to a better trajectory. Ideal compression is no decline and then you die. Very, very few men achieve that. Sadly, we've not found any women yet who do. So the compression's all about moving your decline into a shorter period. Essentially, whatever trajectory you have, you don't really change life expectancy. All you do is compress the periods of high levels of need into a smaller period. So that's the LifeCurve, or compression of decline. At what age does it happen? I can find you 2% of men, 3% of women at the age of 42 in the UK who can't reach their toenails. Alternatively, we could look at the average, which is 79, but of course there's a huge spread, and I can also find you 2.8% of a group of women who can still do that at 100. So age is really just not a useful metric when we talk about age-related decline. What could it be down the bottom? Well, it could be 80, but obviously it's not for a 100-year-old who hasn't started yet. So age doesn't predict where you are on this, although it is true to say the older you are, the more likely you are to be further down. That is true. So let's look at order of interventions. There are 4 stages to this. The first one we call building reserve. So that's trying to keep you off the LifeCurve. That's building up capability before you decline. We'll come back to that later. The second area is actually getting that ability back. That's what we call reactivation. Some people call it reablement. The third thing is what we call compensation. So in this case, I can't give this person their lower right leg back, but I can give them the ability to walk. And we have lots of other examples of that. And the last thing is care. Care is doing something for somebody, which means that they now don't do it for themselves. So premature care is actually disabling. It's really important that we don't do it when we don't need to, that we do things with people rather than for them. But care obviously is necessary when eventually people can't do those things. There are some other factors here. Just your attitude to aging matters. So if you have a negative stereotype of aging, you will be walking slower 2 years later, and you will be more cognitively declined. That was a study of 8,000 people in Ireland. Another factor that's really important, so social isolation in itself doesn't matter, but it's your response to that. So if I live in a family of 8 and I feel lonely, that's as bad for my health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. If I live on my own and I'm happy with that, that doesn't have any impact on my health or my aging. But it's really bad for how you age if you feel lonely. It's bad for everybody at every age, but particularly for how you age. And also we need to understand when people have incidents or whatever, they go into hospital, that they recover well. So getting not just the rehab, not just the recovery from the medical condition, but also getting independence recovery as much as possible. And we know that we can do a lot there. And another important point here is that although we're using 15 markers, for instance, we as a company would have 200 different things that we could help people with. People have all sorts of problems with aging. And at each point, you look at the progression of impairments and you look at what is the most appropriate intervention. And that's how you get the best journey that you can have. Everybody, if they do those things in that order at each time they have a difficulty, they will age the best they can from where they are. So let's look at some examples. So here's some traditional technology. So we've got a walking stick, then you go for 2 walking sticks, then you go for a rollator, 4 wheels, not 3, because it's more stable. And then we have the scooter. It's really important that we don't introduce somebody to a scooter when all they need is a walking stick or a couple of walking sticks. So that's traditional stuff. But the techies have been out there. We've got lots of innovators coming up with all kinds of ideas, and part of this is about helping you understand how to do that well. So here's the Iron Man suit. If you've not seen it before, you might be wondering why I'm putting this up, because it seems pretty futuristic. In fact, in the real world, and honestly this is out of the real world, here's your biofidelic actuated exosuit. So this is a real product. The media called her Exo Granny. This is what it looks like. This is her using it to get up from a chair. The question is this a good idea or not? And if you go back to our framework, if this is making the most of her ability, or compensating for ability that she can't recover, it's a good idea. If this is doing something for her that simple exercises would allow her to do for herself, this is a really bad idea. So technology is not good or bad, it's how we pitch it, how we use it, that makes it good or bad. A couple of final slides really. One is about the costs. So this was a study of 8,200 people where we got the detailed health costs for the last 6 years. We're able to look at what you spend at the different stages, and also looking at what you spend on domiciliary care. So this, if you can keep people for a year at a particular stage, then you can look at how much you will have saved. And it doesn't matter who pays it, there's still the savings, it's just a question of who banked those savings. So let's just have a few very quick examples of this. So the first one was a really simple, low-cost intervention. A head of IT who understands this concept looked at his fellow model makers on a Saturday morning and goes, "We are aging badly. What can I do about that?" So he suggested they make model planes, and had his friends running up and down a field fetching their crashed planes back. And he'd introduced exercise into their Saturday morning without them knowing it. And they were even pleased to do it. That's a brilliant idea for a no-cost intervention. The other end of the scale, this is a study of people in nursing care. So these would be people with the highest needs and health needs as well, and they said, could we do anything to get ability back? So they tested their leg strength and actual muscle mass, and in the space of 6 to 8 weeks they doubled that with simple exercises using stretchy bands and things. Just 1 or 2 in the middle. So I think probably the most interesting one here is the LIFE study, which was a big study of 1,700 people, 850 in control and intervention groups. And what they did was find people who were about to lose the ability to walk 400 yards. The control group were given public health messages about how to age well. The intervention group were given group and individual targeted exercises. The control group lost their ability to walk pretty much straight away. The intervention group kept that for the 2.6 years of the study. And you can go back to the previous slide and just do the maths on how much money they saved through that program. So for my final example, this is really about building reserves. So this was an example of a lady who was about to have a knee replacement. The physio saw her 4 weeks before the operation and said, what is your ambition? And she said, well, you'll have come up a steep hill on the way to my house. The bus stop is at the bottom of that. If I can't get up and down that hill, I've become housebound and I don't want to be housebound. So the physio gave her exercises that she could do for the 4 weeks before her op, and she was signed off post-operatively after 2 weeks. I just think that's a great example. So the LifeCurve really is a tool, I hope I've shown you, it's a tool where you can understand the role of simple technology, the role of exercises, the role of complex technology. So you can do all kinds of different interventions in all kinds of different places. It's not about a particular technology, but understanding the framework within which you should use that technology and how you would get the best impact for somebody without disabling them. And I hope that's helpful to you, and thank you for your time.